No, I totally get that, man. I mean, being a man is definitely difficult. It comes with a lot of different, just like you said, you never get a chance to take a break. You always have something to do. Someone's always expecting something from you. Where does it end, right? And then they wonder why we have like the problems that we have. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, so thank you for coming out, Trey. I really appreciate you doing the second part of the podcast that we did a few weeks ago with Justin. And that was really cool. So what did you think about that podcast? Well, you know what? Before we get started, welcome to Club Geneva. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. We are still exploring some different topics surrounding men's advocacy. It was a really good show, the last one we had with Justin. And then before that, I did a podcast that was just all about the facts and information about certain aspects of men's advocacy. So if you want to be a part of the show, if you think you can take a crack at it, all you have to do is reach out to the email address below, and that's clb.geneva@gmail.com. Why don't you go ahead and just formally introduce yourself, Trey?
Hey, thanks, Eric, man. Thanks for having me. I go by Trey. Some of the kids call me Uncle T. The government knows me by DeAndre Jones. I am a student practitioner, and I study behavior analysis. I'm in my last year of master's before I get the opportunity to sit for the boards, and I also do a lot of community advocacy.
Okay, so with community advocacy, what does that entail for you from the side of just being a man out there? Because it's not a lot of men out there who do some of those things, especially in like non-for-profits and different spaces like that. So what do you see out there when you're doing your community activism deal?
For me, it's about being able to be present and be able to bring a new normal for the communities I serve. So for me, my pleasure, my joy, and my affinity is working with kids and being able to build up the next generation. So that looks like different roles. Sometimes you got to play a father-like role, as in you got to be able to give good information, good advice, be steadfast, be consistent, be a comforter in a meaningful way that is different than a mother. But also, it's also about being someone that's going to show a positive standard. So a lot of kids come from backgrounds where they either didn't have their father in their life, they didn't have a man in their life that was positive, or they didn't have a safe man, or they didn't have a man that showed different aspects of being a man. So I mean, showing a full range of emotions other than just serious and anger or any of those other things. So for me, I just get the cool opportunity to show them that, hey, older men or men in general, we laugh, we play, we have moments where we're going to express ourselves.
Okay, good enough, man. So what's your love life like? That's a big question. What's your love like? Like, I mean, how old are you?
I'm 26, man.
26. Okay. What's happening with that?
It's difficult when you're trying to build something. So the short answer is I'm single. I'm open. I date. I spend a little bit of time, frequenting some nice restaurants. But outside of that, man, pretty much my time is dedicated to the job. That doesn't mean that I am against relationships or marriage or anything like that. I'm truly a one-woman man, but man, you got to build up to that.
So the way I want to do this show tonight is I want to kind of go through some statistics with you, right? When it comes to men's advocacy. So it says with suicide rates, men account for about 75% of all suicides in the United States, with particular high rates among middle-aged men. How does that relate to some of the men that you know in your community and in your life? Have you had any issues with men who have committed suicide or who have went through like severe depression? And how did that reflect upon you?
Yeah, that's actually a very near and dear topic for me. Just recently, as in last year in February, I lost a really close friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, he died by way of suicide. So the topic for me, he was closer to my age, is you always ask the question that everybody would ask if you lost someone to it, but then you have to take yourself out of those types of questions and just start really piecing the thing together from a lens where you have to put yourself in the shoes. So I guess to answer the question straightforward would be, I feel like men are in that position because they're not getting the chance to fully express themselves and they don't have any kind of form of communication to do so. We're not creating safe spaces for men to do that in a way that's meaningful nowadays. And old school, hey, rub some dirt on it, pick it up and carry on, missed us. It's missed this generation because that wasn't started at the foundation. A lot of men who had to go through those things and built up in that kind of way of thinking were men who ultimately would take their lives at the middle age, but they had at least a foundation of a community of people who were thinking this way. Now, when you're in a world where everybody's getting an opportunity to say what they feel, everybody's getting an opportunity to say what they think with the rise of social media, and it's not about social media about just showing the best parts about your life. It's about people feeling comfortable to have a diary they can just put out there.
So men are less likely than women to seek mental health treatment. That's according to the CDC. And I mean, I know that in my own personal life, I know a lot of guys who should actually go and seek that help, who should get some support, but they just don't want to do it for whatever reason it is. I mean, I think it's a cultural deal where we just don't feel like, or maybe we feel like that is something that doesn't correlate with strength and, being a man who can handle things on their own. I see a lot of fellas who should actually get more mental health support, but they don't. So it says that women are more likely to, access mental health care. And it says, according to this, that only around 15% of men seek mental health treatment. And that's kind of crazy, man, when you think about it. I think that actually shows in a lot of these stories that we see on TV, a lot of these tragic events that unfold. We see a lot of men who are hurting, and when they hurt so much and for so long, they actually begin to make those negative choices. And so what do you think about men only seeking mental health treatment at a rate of 15% in this country? What do you feel about that?
I feel the bigger question we need to be asking ourselves as a community is, what message are we sending to men? As a young man at 26, growing up and facing some new harder challenges, I grew up on a hard path. My life was rough coming up, but I feel like being a man has been the roughest thing I've ever experienced, and not necessarily what I experienced as a child. Because the message that gets sent to all men is that your value and your worth is based on numeric value. It's a number. It's a numbers game when it comes to men. And when our worth, how we're loved, how we're greeted, how we're treated, how we're respected is based on a numeric value, that's the problem. That's the message we're telling men. It's hard for me as a man or any man to feel like it's safe for me to say, hey, I can't carry on today. This is one of those hard days I can't get out of bed, when the message that's being pumped to us since we were kids is, hey, you got to get up, you got to be strong, you got to provide. And then when you actually become a man, embody those things, run into some real life challenges that's going to sit you on your tail, then you start to realize, like, wow, only people, to quote Chris Rock in a joke he said, but to put it in a point, only people that are just freely loved are women, children, and dogs. So
I heard that.
Yeah, and I agreed with it. It was funny in the moment, but then it was one of those hard truths that just went down easy with a good joke.
When you watch a lot of the different great comedians of our era, a lot of their material is about men's rights, men's problems, men's issues. And it's funny, but at the same time, when we really take a deeper dive into it, I mean, it's so much meaningful dialogue that's taking place, and they're actually saying something. We laugh at it, but we really should look at it and see, like, man, these fellas are really, in a funny and humor-filled way, they're giving us insight into the challenges that men face.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's life imitating art. These comedians, and to quote one of my favorite ones, Dave Chappelle, he said he pulls from his life. He has to go live, he has to go on the road, he has to have some experiences happen before he gets on the stage, because he feels like that's where he gets his material from. It's not something that he just thinks up on the fly in the car. This is from his personal life experiences. So taking that from that perspective, think about what these men position are. Think about, how the public views them. To kind of reference what you were talking about in your last, show with Justin.
Yeah.
I think it was a really great point that y'all pointed out, how we even handle entertainers. The fact that as a male entertainer, if I make a mistake on live TV, or if I make a mistake, period, it's not going to get erased because social media and technology, but also now it's going to be held, my feet are going to be held to the fire forever. It makes me shudder to think about, like, hey, I made a mistake that I wish nobody would have saw, now the whole world saw, and that's my defining moment. Doesn't matter how hard I worked and all the better qualities of who I am as a person. This one moment is who I am. It was what it culminated to, and that's what cancel culture does, and to everybody, regardless of gender. But now we're talking about the lens of a man. If I'm a comedian and I'm a man of a stature, I have the means to be able to say I can take care of my family, provide, and travel. So that means I'm above a lot of people in America. So I have a financial status that people can go look up. They can go Google my net worth. I'm like an athlete. You can go Google how much money I make. it puts a target on your back that makes you have to walk on eggshells, because now at any second I can make a mistake that's going to be a lifelong thing that everybody's going to talk about, and then everybody's going to try to take everything from me. So now I have to live a life of, before the mistake, everybody wants something from me.
Right.
And then after the mistake, everybody's trying to take everything from me. So now, in between the before and the after, where in the middle am I allowed to be present and say, hey, things aren't going good today? Because that sounds like perfection to me. I have to walk a perfect line to be able to live a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the cancel culture part of it, I think it's primarily affected way more men than women, which is why I think it is actually a men's advocate issue that's possibly overlooked. I can't think of a lot of women besides Roseanne Barr. It was a lady on The View.
Ellen, and that was barely.
Ellen.
That was a slap on the wrist. Man, you talking about her.
Yeah, it was a female, one of the anchors on The View. She said something that was distasteful about Trump, and she was canceled. But I mean, think about how many men are canceled across the board. I mean, you can hear about it every day. Anything that we do, anything we say, it can be held against us in the court of public opinion. And so what is it? What is the function of cancel culture? I struggle to find what's the reason, what's the meaning for it. And I got to say, it's been more of a liberal thing, a liberal agenda to cancel people more than it's been a conservative issue. If you catch my drift.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like it's a tool. I feel like it's a tool to knock people out of their positions. I'm not saying that those people haven't done some things that are not appropriate. Nobody's perfect.
No, you're totally right, man. See, here's the reality, how I look at it. I look at cancel culture as a microcosm of the bigger problem of a giant pendulum swing.
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time, this whole world and this whole country, specifically this young country that's only been around for 240 years, was built on man, and men want, men do.
Right.
And everybody else has to fall in line. Mm-hmm. That means somebody has to get the short end of the stick. And that short end of the stick fell on the population that now has the pendulum swinging back their way. Anybody that was disenfranchised during that time, which was women, children, anyone that was in a certain color, certain race, certain status. But now, with advancements in, and I keep referencing technology because it's leveled the playing field so much, but advancements in technology, advancements in medicine, advancements in education, advancements in so many, all these different industries that has allowed for the leveling of the playing field, the pendulum swinging all the way back. So now it's swinging all the way back. You have men who were once running everything being on the tail end of the rabbit getting the gun, essentially what it looks like. And somewhere in this swinging, we're going to have to come back to the middle. So I feel like we're just in the time of this being swung all the way to the left, for lack of a term.
So you think that, if I'm hearing you right, you think that cancel culture is a almost retribution that goes all the way back 50, 60, 70 years, even further, because it was a disenfranchised or a group of people who were disparaged, right?
Yes.
They didn't get opportunities, or certain things happened to them as a group, right? And now that pendulum has swung, and now it's the men's turn to get it. And I struggle with that, though, because especially being a black man, or even just being a minority, period, we're in multiple different spaces at the same time, right?
Yeah.
We were men, of course, but we didn't get the same opportunities that quote unquote white men in the country who started the country got. So why are we being held to that same standard, and why is that pendulum swinging on to us? We're already starting off at a messed up, we didn't have the same start line that men have had historically in this country. So we're kind of paying for that too. I mean, if I catch your drift, that's what you're saying.
Unfortunately, yeah, man. We're.
I mean, that's a great way to look at it.
We're a casualty of war. We're a casualty of war. There's people who are swinging this pendulum, and we're just getting hit along the way. And that doesn't make it right. That's just making it real of what's going on from my perspective. Because as a man, as a black man in America, I fall in a lot of these groups that you're talking about, and I fall in a lot of these different categories, and I find myself feeling like I have to pick a side on these topics. Like, all right, do I stay true to being a man, or do I stay true to equality? Because ultimately, a lot of these rights that are being leveled on the playing field now opens the doors for, you know, anybody of color or minority to have opportunities to, you know, bring themselves up, get a better start. But at the end of the day, now that still doesn't mean that we're not punishing men in the process.
Who do you think is responsible for that pendulum? Who's pushing it?
Ooh.
Am I going to get you canceled or what?
No, man. No, if this doesn't mean some of these streams will. But
okay, right.
How I look at it is this: I look at everything in life as a journey of self.
Mm-hmm.
So the pendulum is being swung by us, and I'm not saying men. I'm saying us, and whoever you feel like you fit that role. So if you feel like you're an us or you're a them who's doing this, you are. What I want the message to be for men's advocacy is for not young men to get into this red pill movement of the darker side of it, because there's a lot of good information that's coming out about what it means to be a man. As a man who didn't grow up with his father but had great, you know, men around him like yourself, I had the opportunity to learn and be able to have conversations that I was scared to have or I couldn't have with a female lead. But now it's gotten off the rails. So my point is the message for men's advocacy is about self-awareness, not self-reliance. We shouldn't be looking for self-reliance to a place where it's a dog-eat-dog world. Yes, that is a reality of life. Yes, I feel like every man should be capable of being willing to push themselves to a limit that they weren't aware that they could reach in their own self on their own. But it's about a journey of self-actualization. Because I feel like it's either one or two things right now from my perspective. Either I got to be a He-Man woman hater, or I got to be this completely emasculated, lapdog.
So let me ask you this question, because I want to keep going down the line. We kind of went left a little bit, and that's fine. No, you're fine. No, totally. No, you're fine. But what I wanted to know is, this is the question about substance abuse. Men are nearly twice as likely as women to binge drink, and substance abuse rates are higher in men, with the opioid crisis having a significant impact on men across many age groups. What do you feel about men and substance abuse?
I feel like men and substance abuse, it's the low-hanging fruit. It's the low-hanging fruit that is blossomed into this horrible thing and this horrible plan. So what I mean by that is the ultimate thing that brings everybody the most joy is relationships. Okay. And when I mean relationships, it could be platonic or romantic. Okay. But relationships are ultimately what makes a fulfilling life. Right now, going back to the original point we made about what is a man's worth and his value, he's worthy and value on what he can provide and a space he can provide for and provide with. So if it's super expensive, rates on everything, we always talk about inflation, but inflation looks like everything everywhere. So it's not just about housing. Everybody wants to make it strictly about housing. It's about food. It's about entertainment. It's about travel. Everything's up across the board. If I'm a man and everything about my value and who I am is based off of what I can provide and I can do, and the most successful relationships I can have and obtain in my life are going to be things that are going to be top value as far as like pricing, then now there's a barrier. Now it costs me $59.99 just to be able to go spend time with a girl who's willing to sit down and listen to me.
Right. I also think that, men are just really, we really don't mind kicking our own asses. We don't do ourselves any favors. We kind of abuse ourselves. You can see a lot of different instances in society where we expend ourselves way too much. And I think at the end of all that expending, we need to self-medicate. I think it's just culturally normal that men somehow, not everyone, but most men, a large majority of men, use self-medication as a way to cope. When I see people doing too much of something, even myself, I'm no angel. When I'm doing too much of something, I'm coping, right? It's something that is bothering me. It's something that I'm not being fulfilled, right? I'm not happy for some odd reason, and I'm trying to find a way to cope with it. I think it sucks. We already die earlier than women, and then we live half our lives serving them. Yeah. It's a no-win situation for some men.
No, you ain't lying.
Yeah. Now you see that in our country we have, I want to say, divorces happen at about 60%. Women initiate divorces in this country, even higher, I think, in some statistics. What do you feel about that? Does that encourage you to be married in the future or not?
No, it's definitely a deterrent. It's tough because even the people who are sticking it together, they don't talk highly of marriage. They don't talk highly of their partners. Okay. So it's like even that 40% that make it, man, I would say of that 40, only 10% are living out the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got 50%, you know, the 60 that didn't make it. And then that's very apparent and on Front Street. And then you got the 30% that's begrudgingly still together.
Okay.
So it doesn't feel good. What I've gathered, being able to sit down and listen to a lot of couples, you know, men and women alike of different ages and their stages, express what they feel about marriage. For me, when we're talking about men's advocacy, it really boils down to how I see it. Men not doing the initial grunt work at the beginning to be prepared for the marriage. So when I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, I was explaining to him about what singleness is really supposed to be about. I feel like singleness is about taking that time to build yourself, not that time to forget yourself. That's the time to discover yourself. You're supposed to be spending your time in your single manhood, being able to figure out what your likes and dislikes are. Okay. What are your buttons? What are your boundaries? Who are you as a person? And then what is it that you feel passionate about to building in this life, that your love letter to the future, you know, your legacy. And then as you're doing that along the way, you'll find out when you get into a relationship, what you're prepared to do and not to do, and what you're prepared to put up with and not put up with. But also, if you're doing those things correctly, in my opinion, you're going to put yourself in a position that when that girl comes along, or whoever your partner wants to be, whoever your personal choice is, but for this case, a woman, once that girl comes along, you're better equipped to add her into your life. Because the biggest thing I hear amongst women when they express, you know, their displeasures with marriage is that they aren't getting what they signed up for. And really that comes from the fact that men didn't even know what they were setting. They didn't even know what their brand was. They didn't even know who they were. So they get this girl, they bring her along, and now she's a part of a self-discovery journey. And most of them don't want to be part of that, especially girls my age nowadays.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I look at that differently, though. I see that divorce rate, in my mind, is connected to not the fact that women just want to divorce men at some high rate. I think it bears more to the fact that men need to be better at picking women.
Yeah.
To begin with, right? Like I said on that last show, when we meet women sometimes, we jump way too hard, right? We jump in, we dive in way too hard. And I think that we end up punishing ourselves for not doing the back work. And I don't mean like, you know, and I think that a lot of the men's advocates, especially the negative ones online, you know, they attribute that to, oh, you know, you need to pick a woman who has this, that. It's not about what someone actually has. It's about the moral character of the woman who you pick. I think if you take the time and you work very hard to sift through and find someone who has that character, who has that love in their heart and that supportive nature that a woman, that we love so much about women, I think you get a better woman. I think sometimes we meet our women just way too fast. We're just too willing to just dive head first into a relationship and not giving it that space and time to develop where we can make some good choices. And by the time we look up, we're dealing with someone who we don't really know, right? How many women say they're trying to find themselves? Like you just mentioned. You just mentioned it. I'm trying to find myself. Well, dear, you should have found yourself before you ever got into this situation.
Oh, yes.
Right? That's no excuse to walk away from the contract that you signed. Ultimately, in America, we have a problem with marriage, period. You know, and I think it boils down to the politics. I think it boils down to the legal value of divorces, right? It's not the marriage, it's the divorce that is being capitalized on. They make a couple nickels off of a marriage. They make thousands, society makes thousands and thousands, millions and millions of dollars on divorces. So it's incentivized for us in our culture to not have as much value involved in marriage. And it's just, you know, it's disheartening to see. And I could see it maybe being a problem for a young man like you coming into age where you could get married, actually having some thoughts about that before you move forward and possibly not doing it at all. What's the incentive for you?
Yeah, so you said a lot I want to touch on. I would say number one, the first thing is I wish more men normalize dating again. And what I mean by that is, as a man who believes and we have a personal responsibility to take the lead, and we all want to talk about we lions and we all these dogs and all these different things, we'll take the lead in the meaningful areas, like take the lead in patience. Take the lead in saying, hey, we're going to set this pace at a slow one. Normalize dating again. Normalize, hey, it's okay for you to do something nice that's not going to break the bank, and it's not going to be over the top as an over the top gesture. Because how I look at it is something I've learned from other people is that a lot of the times the gesture says more about how you want to be perceived than what you're really doing for the other person. So like what ends up happening is women are falling in love with the gesture, and men are falling in love with the gesture just as much as the women are. We're more excited about saying, you know, I took the cutest thing and the baddest thing walking to the nicest restaurant and flew her out and doing all these different things, than really getting to know the person. And then vice versa. Now there's a standard where she's like, well, the last guy did this and he did it for nothing. I only knew him for 2 days and he flew me out. So why aren't you doing the same thing? No, we should normalize meaningful dates, and dates that consist of you having to sit upright and hold a full conversation. I don't think conversation's a skill that most people have anymore. They can't sit across from each other and actually intellectually barb and have disagreements that are civilized and be able to want to know the other person's perspective.
Right.
So that leads into a lot of big problems. And then you get into the other part that you mentioned and brought up, and that I don't think people are even taught the consequences of their actions and held their feet to the fire. And specifically, when we're talking about men's advocacy, I would have to give it to the ladies on this one of them not knowing the consequences. You know, you can't haphazardly jump in and out of something that could be life-changing. The same way you guys can accept and understand the consequence of having a baby, as in, oh, that's life-changing, that's going to change my body, that's going to change my schedule, I will never be the same. You should look at your marriage the same way.
Okay. So you think we rush too fast?
Absolutely. The world is too fast. We have too much that allows us to speed up. Everything's too fast. And when you're talking about men's advocacy, we forget the value of not only that patience, but time. I think that we're not valuing time the correct way.
See, but that's why I think that men should really take a hell of a lot of time figuring out the woman that they want in their lives, right? We shouldn't be out there playing as much as we do, because we're kind of disillusioning ourselves. I think that a lot of these men's advocate issues that we have, especially when it comes to women, such as like child support, custody battles, alimony, divorce, all these hot button topics, I don't blame women. I blame actually our choice in picking good women. But I can guarantee that if you find a woman with some value and some intelligence, and someone who has character and knows, right from wrong, it's going to make those processes a lot easier. And I see guys on that other side who have made good picks in women, and even a divorce goes better. A lot of those folks are still friends, right? That's a good thing, versus dealing with someone who has none of those things. And then now you got to pay child support. Now you can't see your kid because not only are you paying the child support, they want more. And now they're hiding the kid from you. Now they're bringing in a guy who, doesn't have the same value that you have being around your kid. Now you're dealing with that situation. It's just the list goes on and on and on when you deal with someone of low value. And that's what I think, like the Kevin Samuels and people like that meant by value. They wasn't talking about six figures. See, when you watch that show, those ladies were talking about six figures, people as being valuable. But when Kevin and the other male advocates talk about value, they're talking about something totally different, right? They're talking about worth, self-worth. So I think that when we take the time and we invest more into us, then we'll find a better person to be with. Because there's not only, the red pill movement isn't even just for men, it's for women too. There are women who are red pill women. So that's what I got to think. That's what I think about it. So let me ask you this. On this note, who, if you know any of those male advocates, who's your favorites right now?
These guys have great things to say, but their delivery is something that I don't agree with because I have my own viewpoint. So, like, for example, the Kevin Samuels, I love what Kevin was doing. Because, like you said, I watched a couple episodes, and he wasn't out there degrading people. He was being honest with people. Like, I've seen him on episodes where he'll have a conversation with a woman and say, okay, well, what do you want? Well, I want my man to have an 8-pack. And she ain't never seen the gym. That's not fair. That don't make no sense. And I've also seen them flipping on guys. Well, I want my girl to be a certain kind of look. Okay, well, you're not in the gym and you're not providing a lifestyle for her to even be able to keep with that. You know what I'm saying? What's the point of her having acrylics and she got to work a job next to you at the factory? Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you want her to be a certain kind of way, you got to take a certain kind of lead. So I like those types of messages. It's when you get into that Charleston White area where it's like you're degrading people and then being cartoony about it, where it's like, all right, man, I can't. So I can't even answer your question because I like a little bit of everything from everybody. I like the way certain people carry themselves.
Okay. Fair enough. And I think I get what you're saying too, man, because I was sitting here thinking as I asked that question, I'm like, I can't really recall most of their names. Honestly, they're just like these figures. You know, they're just like these figures that just kind of like exist. You turn on Facebook, you turn on Instagram or whatever, and you just see these guys. And it seems to be like it's so many of them. The market is oversaturated.
Yeah.
I actually feel bad doing this show. I mean, I know it's going to, be a decent show, and I'm not trying to take anything off the top. I'm not trying to be a part of that at all. The Club Geneva is for everyone. And I plan to do shows from the women's aspect of things too, their perspectives, because I want to know. And that's really what this show is about, me personally figuring out things. And not following through on my own mind, not being in the echo chamber. I like this show to be out of the echo chamber. So when I see this overly saturated market of men online, it's very blurry, right?
Yeah.
I don't know who, like, what makes you want to get up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to do a podcast specifically against women. Even furthermore, I'm a black man and I'm going to do a podcast specifically against black women. I see what they're saying though. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that they discuss on there, absolutely rightfully so, need to be addressed. Not only as a society, but in our own culture as black people. Mm-hmm. We have some problem areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have some real gripes that not only men have against women, but women have against men. And I think that the podcast can bring people to those spaces, but when we use them the wrong way, it just becomes entertainment for everyone else around the world to look at and laugh, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't need that type of attention on us. Lord knows we got enough.
Yeah.
We got enough stuff on our plate to be worried about people exposing our relationship problems, right? Everyone has them, but when you see 40, 50 different black men online with the same podcast, essentially, it creates a bad picture, a bad image for us, and we don't need that in our culture. We came too far for it. But yeah, man, I mean, this has been a really good conversation, man. It has. I've enjoyed it. I've really appreciated your insight. You know, you're a young guy, but you got a lot of brain power working up there. You were firing on all cylinders. And I think that other men, young men, especially around your age, will get a lot from what you said. I'd love to have you back on the show whenever, man. Definitely.
Man, I love you having me here, man. I love the space you created, man. You do a great job of creating meaningful conversations. It's easy to have these kinds of responses, to give these kinds of responses, because you're not only not afraid to ask the questions, but you're open-minded. Every time I've had a conversation with you, whether it be on camera or off camera, it's always been an open-minded conversation about the what-ifs, and we're actually talking these things through. So, man, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing with your platform.
No problem, man. I talk a lot of shit. I think most people know that, right?
Hey, man, those will flood together, right?
Yeah. Before we close off, me and Trey, we had a show previously that we had recorded. It was during the Diddy scandal. I think right before he even got. Yeah. I think it was even before that, right before he even got arrested. We were just kind of speculating on some things, and the show was. It was a great show. It was better than this one because from the technical aspect. Well, from the perceived technical aspect of the show, because the video was on point, right? But we did this whole show. It was cool. We had a good time laughing and joking. We talked about the beef with Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole and Drake. It was fun. And I just totally messed up because I didn't check the audio, and the audio just went to pieces. So at the end of this show, I think I'm going to play a little bit of that before I close out when I do my little editing and stuff, because I think people would probably like to hear that. But yeah, man, thank you for being on the show, Trey. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it, man. Definitely. Yep. And you got a tough handshake, man. You caught me. You trumped me, dude. No, you trumped me. You grabbed my hand just like that, man. You squeezed like a little old baby.
Look, it's the reach, man. You had a good reach in it.
Oh, you got me real good. Yeah, thank you all for coming out tonight and watching the show. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing. We're trying to grow this platform. Ladies, don't take this conversation personal. It's more of an enlightening thing. And we will do shows that are from the other side of the aisle, because I think you have a lot to say. It's not just a one-way conversation. And that's what I truly don't like about the male advocacy online, is that it's just a one-way conversation. And I know that a lot of our women out there are upset with some of the things that we do and some of the ways that we behave. So I do want to have a show where women can actually bring up, well, you know, I'm going to do the show. I'm going to bring up some of those high points about what women are arguing for and what they're so upset about when it comes to us as men. So with that being said, yeah, just keep on watching and look out for that show to be coming soon. But thank you all so much for being a part of Club Geneva. And we look forward to catching up with you on the next show. Have a great night. That's it.
Presentation, everything you already know. I got to know you personally over time, and during this time, you've always been about the main thing, and the podcast keeps the main thing the main thing. I love it.
You know, I think it was well worth it, because right now, I mean, I feel pretty capable of being able to do stuff like this, and that's kind of that's nice for me, man. It's real nice to be able to have something like that. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate it. That's beautiful. It's been an awesome time already. Just being seeing the behind the scenes, and seeing the experience and how it's been going on. I'm learning a lot. Learning how you're putting things together, and just the fact that you put it together so fast, so soon, and just put it together so smooth, man, it just shows the sky's the limit for anything you want to do.